And you didn't even call me out for how lazy I was with the hair when actually I was
I think
terrified.
it's a personal fault to me too. Because honestly, this hair looks not fun to draw.
I was like,
Paperlike presents Ergo Josh.
you've seen his amazing paint portraits on Instagram. You've binged his YouTubes and streams, and he's here to critique my art, which I can't believe. And I think you're going to learn a lot from the amazing insights of Ergo Josh.
The funny thing when I opened up I don't know why, I was drawn to Zendaya as soon as I saw like the portraits that you did.
Yeah.
And I saw so much of myself back 2017 in your work, that whole process video.
That's amazing to hear.
I was like, wow, this is bringing back memories.
That's only like 4 years ago.
Yeah, it seems so long, but it's like, it feels so close.
So should we take a look at Zendaya and see what my strengths and weaknesses were?
I think first I just looked at your work, but what I did first was I actually went to the time-lapse replay, and I was like, oh wow, I guess everyone does that thing where they test out brushes when they start off. And then I saw you're using the ball with the sliced portions for the sides of the head, and then you're starting to measure things out. I don't know, were you thinking of like the Loomis method in particular?
Yeah, that was kind of my entree into drawing heads and studying it, which has been good and also a huge frustration at the same time.
Definitely, because I see you trying so many different things.
Yeah,
here.
I'm flailing.
Yeah, this part right here. I was like, yep. Here I was like, he's getting so into the weeds here with like the measurements.
Yeah, I had set out to I wanted to do a good drawing because everything I've done like on my own channel has been not looked like the reference.
Yeah.
And I was like, I am going to make it look like her no matter how many times I have to start over.
The likeness thing is really, really tough. It's one of the toughest things to do. And I see here starting to adjust things. And then it was really cool that you're using like a different color and you switched. I found that interesting because it looked like a really nice sketch at the end, with the different values here, very light, ethereal kind of sketch. But yeah, then I was like, oh wow, I know exactly which drawings I did that would correspond to this and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was really cool to see that process again.
When I decided to start drawing, I'm like, well, I'll draw people that people would recognize, because then I can go and say, do you know who this is? And then, I'd show it to my daughter and she's like, and I go, oh,
that's tough. It's gonna be rough.
And it's like, what are the features, if you could say, that are like the details that actually capture a likeness?
So I learned this actually in the course. One of the most important things is the keystone here, which is that space in between your eyebrows, and then in between your eyebrows and in between your forehead and the bridge of your nose can be really, really iconic to how someone looks. It tends to be bigger on women, smaller, more narrow on men. But then some men have it completely reversed. Some women have it completely reversed. So we can see here with Zendaya, her eyebrows are very close, much closer than you would typically do after studying the differences between men and women for their anatomy. So that's something that would make her look like her, because that's unique and it tends to be different. And then a lot of everything else it's really the same thing. It's the proportions of where the locations, right? So the proportion of the location of her nose to her lips there, the distance her eyes are apart there, the width of her nose compared to, the eyes as well, the angle here, all of these little things can make a big difference. And so I find that one of the things that I think is going to be key for you to be doing when you move on is to be really focusing on capturing shapes boldly. And it's going to be rough because you're going to want to zoom into those details a lot, but you have to be bold with the shapes that you're capturing. And then you're going to start to get better and better at noticing those in different people and getting them accurate. So just as an example, one of the big things I noticed here is the shape of the eyebrow that you did.
Mm-hmm.
So here, this eyebrow isn't the same shape as hers. Yours is fairly thin here, and it's like almost straight. You can see there's this very thin rectangle shape.
Yeah.
And then if I break it up again, there's another one, and then you have a little taper there. Whereas for her, it's like this, where this is chunkier.
Yeah.
Then there's this quick arch where it's just a triangle. And then I do another rectangle like that. And then I do a pretty fairly long taper like that. So the ability to recognize things like that is something that comes with, time and experience. But I'm sure you can see like that difference there is something I would probably catch pretty like early on. But the way you did it was more because I think you were probably trying to focus so much on the little things and you weren't kind of taking that step back.
I want to stop right there because when Josh was talking about the eyebrow and breaking it down to these geometric shapes, I'll admit that I was like, that's exciting, but I couldn't grasp it entirely in the moment. So here we have Amelia Clark, the actor of a billion eyebrow shapes. I'm going to try this technique on her eyebrows. So let me shrink it down, place it over. I mean, it's not perfect. Now, the way Josh did it was really fast and probably a lot simpler. He probably, I'm guessing, would have combined some of these shapes. So he wouldn't have done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shapes to get the eyebrow maybe. But just in that, I learned a huge amount. That was a really helpful tip. One of the things that's caught me out in previous efforts is the tilt of the head. And so I spent a lot of time trying to get.
I know you nailed that here.
I guess that's one of the things is like, what are the landmarks to put in first? I'm trying to move the Loomis head concept over, but that's a pretty loose model that that not every face fits. So, and then it's like, well, is her head 5 eyes wide or 6 eyes wide? Yeah. And it really becomes very almost mechanical of trying to figure out the starting point.
I don't know what contributes to that transition. I think for me, it came from a frustration of that, where it reached a point to where I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't want to count the eyes. I didn't want to, you were doing this thing here across the portrait as well, which is something I do as well, or I did. And then I got to a place where I'm like, I just want to be able to get those cool shapes I see in these artists that I like. And so I found for me, this is where I'm going to do one of those plugs where I have a video where it's pretty old now, where it was like how to draw faces easily. And it was kind of my revelation of how I broke the face down into this triangular shape that allowed me to start to make comparisons and references with what I'd already drawn. So it's basically just this. And a lot of artists have something similar because it's just really just abstracting the skull shape. And so I forced myself to project this onto I would trace this diagram onto as many faces as I could to start to see get an idea for what the deviations were. And I kind of came up with these shapes based off of, there's this golden ratio concept that you can get for male and female faces on Google. And I was like, okay, I want to abstract that and make it simpler. And so I did that. And I was like trying to come up with this. And this is like all these extra lines that are there if you look it up. But mainly it's this shape and this one. And then from there, I was like, okay, I've got to find where those are and learn to just see where everything is.
Golden ratio faces that Josh was referring to are called the Marquardt mask, and I'm going to put a link in the description below so you can just find them right away. Josh's revelation was that he could simplify that complex mask into this diamond shape, and he talked about projecting it onto a bunch of different faces. Well, that's just drawing it on a bunch of different faces and learning how those faces conform or deviate from that. When you draw that diamond then onto a blank screen, it provides the scaffolding for you to get the eyes and the nose and the mouth all in the right spot to capture that likeness. Or you can just use it as a standard of beauty to draw an attractive character or deviate from it to create a more unique character. I think it's a really cool idea, and I'm going to be experimenting with it a lot.
Then I normally would okay, I've got to find these points where the the corners of the eyes are, and then figure out, okay, what is, like if she's looking this way, this one's shorter. If she's looking that way, this eye's shorter. So it's like, okay, or in this case, are they going to be equal? So I decide that. And then I would just start doing, okay, this is, okay, if I want to follow that shape, I'm going to go in the middle on both sides and then make this a nice, clean shape like that. And I would slowly do that over and over. And those shapes would get clearer and clearer. Like for another example, the shape of the eye here is really ambiguous. It's like you have like just a clean arc here and then this arc. Whereas if I were drawing it myself, just looking at her eye here, I see, if I'm gonna, I'll just be organic with it first. And I'll just draw that arc. I know it's a lot bigger on this end. It's pretty exaggerated. So I'm probably gonna assume that this is gonna be this line instead of the actual brow line. But then I'll come back here and give that a nice almond shape like that. And then I'll probably, since her eyes are thinner, I'll add another one here. And then you can see the clear decisions here. So there's this component here for that tear duct. You can see here where this is kind of like a very round shape. And then this is just connecting those two together. And then that's how I would approach this. And you would see that very clearly on my drawing. And so here, that's something that you would start to pay attention to when you're like, okay, I want to find these key shapes and really get them down boldly. And then when you do that, you start to make bold mistakes. It's easy to keep a record of those mistakes, and you start to get really accurate. So it's that kind of like being bold and diving off into the deep end, knowing that you're going to be making some really bold, not good, not like the reference drawings, but you'll learn a lot faster.
Josh's phrase, make bold mistakes, was this big aha moment kind of thing for me. And he's talked about that through the entire critique, about bold lines, bold shapes. And so how do I, say, draw her eye more boldly? So this is my interpretation of the really roughest version of her right eye. But look how wrong I got that angle here. But he said make bold mistakes, because then when you do the comparison, it's much clearer. When you make the confident decision and then you do the comparison, then the brain can actually learn. Make bold mistakes might be life wisdom, unless you're flying a plane or doing brain surgery. The eyes, of course, and I think every artist has this desire to draw eyes amazing. And when they're learning, it doesn't get anywhere close to amazing. Why do mine all look like, Egyptian art that's real flat? What I'm hearing is that I'm being too tentative maybe with these shapes, and that what you drew, it just came out of your Apple Pencil. It's like, here, just do this.
Yeah.
How many hours are behind this?
I'd say there's a lot, because I've drawn a lot of eyes, and I've really struggled with eyes because I still do, where they're at different angles, or let's say the eyes will be one. I always like, whenever it's a 3/4 view, let's say it's like, this is the shape of the head, and this is the neck. I'll always draw this eye this big and that eye like that. And I won't know this for the longest time, until you'll flip the image or something. But I'd say it takes, easily hundreds of hours. I don't know how I track that, but it comes from basically knowing what the eye is, and then knowing what you have to draw to, like, what simplified shapes correspond to that. So it's like, I know the eye is a sphere here. I know that the eyelids are wrapping around it. So it's going to have a pretty significant arch. I know that the sphere, the way I drew, is actually wrong. It's like this. It's more towards the right. It's not sitting dead center. So this is why, that's not right. It's like this, but the eye also comes, the closest part of the eye to us is that very center, right, of where the pupil is. So that's why this is opened more. And then on the sides, it's very tiny because the eye is already back. So when you try to wrap something around a sphere like this, the opening is going to be bigger. If you can think of like splitting an orange, you just cut the skin. And then if you let the orange sit out, it's going to start to stretch.
Mm-hmm.
The skin will dry, and the center will dry up a lot more than the sides because it's already tight right there. So that's why I would consciously make that shape. And then I would, add the eyelids, give them thickness. So it's that knowledge that comes through when you understand, okay, what's there? How do I simplify it? And then there's the mileage of getting your drawings. You just got to draw a lot, but you got to have that understanding combined with that mileage, and then that's where that kind of comes from.
Do you recall, like, in your journey of like one day you drew something, you're like, I can't even believe I just did that? Or was it a gradual thing where you didn't notice the progression, and only when you look back at what you drew a year or two ago were you able to see the difference?
I definitely say it's both. There are moments where it's like, wow, I can't believe I drew that, and it looks almost like foreign to you. It's like you dissociate from it almost. But then there are times where it feels like, I'd say, instead of feeling like there's no improvement, you'll feel like you're making little improvements, and then there'll be a setback. That's how I see it, at least. And then those are the things that really do hurt. And those little improvements, little improvements, setback are the longest stretches of time.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where it's like you said, where you do look back, you realize those setbacks weren't huge 50-step setbacks like I thought. It's more like I improved a little bit, 100 little tiny steps, and the setback was maybe 5. But it feels like it was like 90. And over the course of a year, you look back and it's like, oh, wow, I've actually grown a lot. The things I see and pay attention to are so much more. You see, I look back and how I'd summarize it as like, I would see laziness where I didn't do something, or I would see lack of awareness where I didn't see something that I see now. And so that's the kind of thing that tends to happen over time. And hopefully that, can help a lot of people out, because there are a lot of those times where you just feel pushed back. But as long as you make sure you maximize those little step periods, those matter. Those really add up.
Just studying the Loomis head, even though it's frustrating to me, helped with understanding proportion and making it look more human.
Yep.
I wonder sometimes, like, what's past the studying of the Loomis head? There's a lot that it doesn't teach.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that at least on one video you mentioned getting into the O'Reilly concept or something?
Riley
Riley method. And it seemed really detailed. But is that a direction that people should go when they're trying to learn to draw the human figure? Or is there a different, especially if you're like me and not inclined to want to do a lot of engineering approach to drawing?
It's tough for me. I feel like that approach is kind of necessary for everyone. I might be biased, because I think when you first off, you want to start, doing the Loomis method, Riley, I'd say those are kind of the same kind of step, where you're learning from what other people have figured out. You don't have to figure out how far the eyes are apart. You don't have to figure out how big the eye should be with respect to the nose and the mouth. You can learn those really cool tips, right? To where you should be able to get to a point where you can create a drawing, no matter how bad or inexperienced you are. You have the facts there, so you should be able to put the ears in the right place, the nose, the mouth, the eyes in the right place, because okay, I have the Loomis method next to me. I can just measure it out, right? And everyone can get a decent, skill with saying, okay, I mean, everyone can, basically, this is the skill that's necessary. Take a line, okay, it's easy to divide that in 2, but the skill to divide that in 3, you may not do it perfectly the first time, but you can kind of adjust it, right, to where it gets pretty close. And that's really the only skill you need to draw basic, just factually correct head, I guess. In order to move on, I would say it requires something similar to what I was doing, where you start to prove to yourself how this works. And so, like what I was saying with the golden ratio, I was like, all right, I want to see this with shapes and get an intuition for it, instead of just measuring it out all the time. That process might not be as architectural and geometric as that is for me, but for some it could just come through repetition. I found one thing that I was trying a little bit earlier on. I don't know if I really wanted to commit to it, but one thing I found was helpful was giving myself a little bit of a place to imagine things. So I started doing this thing where I would do dots. And I, just for my aesthetic sake, I was like, I like it when the eyes raise up to the sides like this. And then just thinking, okay, I can put dots in the right place. I don't know if, okay, this is showing off a little bit, but, and it's like, okay, I know where these dots kind of correspond. And then I could kind of fill in these areas here. And this isn't as impressive as it looks because I am basically tracing your drawing, but it's like eventually I could just get an idea for how it looks. And this is a lot easier to do when you have those lines there. It's not as challenging just going in with the dots. It's not as challenging as just going in with blind and trying to make the lines automatically. And it's like it was very easy for me to keep those proportions right because I'm used to just drawing those people, overlaying it from the reference, seeing what I did wrong. And then if I make a mistake like 10 times in a row where it's always like I make the nose too big, then you just do noses in relation to mouths as many times as you can to figure that out and be like, all right, I'm going to draw this eye tiny because I keep drawing the eye big when I'm getting in the zone. And so then I could just, this is something I would do sometimes where I'd give myself this kind of like draw it, fill it in sheet. I don't know how you call it, like a coloring book sheet. And already here I can tell like this head is just too massive just by placing those dots. So I can just kind of like, it helps me kind of visualize. And I find that you do want to develop that sense for visualization because that's what art kind of tends to be. At the end of the day, it is very natural, subjective, and giving yourself a little bit of help. If I found really, really helps me. So like I find even today, if I want to draw a body from memory, it's really hard. But if I get a portrait and then draw the rest of the body, I can do it really easily because I have something to give me like, oh, maybe they're doing this. This is what they're like this is what the character is like. So I'd say trying to practice intuition, getting that stronger is probably the next step for anyone who's, all right, I'm done trying to measure, breaking the ruler out, doing all the comparisons with, like the pencil, trying to view it. Maybe if you're doing figure drawing. But yeah.
I mean, you basically created a connect the dots for yourself.
Yeah.
And the dots were going at specific spots in the eyes, the eyebrows, different parts of the face to plot out sort of landmark spots to make sure that the width and height and the proportions were kind of in place. I have never seen that before.
Maybe I should get a video on that.
I think you do. You should, because that's really interesting. Starting with a blank screen, there's sort of a feeling of, I don't know how to phrase it, of being adrift, of like, I don't even know like what to put in first, and to be the reference point for distance for other features. And I've always just used the eyebrows. And
honestly, I'd say eyebrows are an excellent place because like I'm trying to force myself to get used to doing that because they tell you so much. Like I can just draw a set of eyebrows here and I've had to practice like this angle in particular quite a bit. And if I just draw the eyebrows, they tell you so much about where this person is looking, right? They're not looking straight at the camera. They're looking somewhere like that. And then one of my favorite ones is like this one where it looks like that. And I learned the eyebrow kind of looks like it's tucking in, and that means this person's looking that way. And so I found, eyebrows definitely, I'd say if they find that helpful, to stick to it because it's a very accurate, good place to start, and it tells you a lot already. I'd say nothing else on the face tells you as much as, no other feature tells you as much as the eyebrows do by themselves, at least.
I'm going to take this critique. I'm going to watch it back several times and make notes.
Awesome.
And I think that my job is to, obviously I just need to draw more. But I want to experiment with this connect the dots concept. I think I still need to stay with my Loomis head, maybe look at the Riley method and at least go through the process of drawing that all out. Because you don't really learn anything by reading it or looking at a YouTube until you actually put your pencil down or your Apple Pencil down and actually do it. And then it goes through the brain in a different way and the lessons take hold.
And especially one practice I did was just drawing it over people so many times, like photographs like this, and be like, all right, prove it to myself. Get used to, instead of just seeing a pretty face, I see, oh, this landmark here. Like I remember seeing you get this so clearly. And then like that cut off so clearly there when you were doing your measurements. And like that's the kind of stuff you're going to start paying attention to. And when you start to see that all the time, that's where you're going to start getting that intuition building up.
It's such an amazing privilege to be able to talk to you and get that direct feedback on something that I've drawn. And you didn't even call me out for how lazy I was with the hair, when actually I was terrified.
I think it's a personal fault to me too, because honestly, this hair looks not fun to draw.
I was like, she's got clear goggles on, and I'm like, why did I choose this? I'm going to improve so that 4 years from now, I'm going to be able to look back and say, hey, I made progress. So did something here really resonate with you and give you that excitement to go do some drawing? Let us know in the comments. There's another part to this conversation that's coming up. Josh answers a bunch of questions that I had and offers enormous insights into not only how to draw, but how to be an artist. And I know all of you artists are creating some amazing stuff, so no matter where you're at on your journey, we want to see it. So share it on Instagram and tag Paperlike and me, Eric Edstrom Draws, and use hashtag #DrawWithPaperlike. We will be back soon with that part 2, so subscribe, and like,